Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, Chief Storymaker and your host of this podcast. We share stories for many reasons. We want to persuade, we want to entertain, and we want to connect. But what we sometimes forget is the impact of the stories we tell ourselves. Whether you're sharing personal stories or business stories, how you share them makes a difference in how you remember them and in how you're being perceived by the people you're sharing them with. In this series, you'll hear stories that will resonate with you, and you'll nod your head in understanding, and then we'll dig into lessons from each of those stories. How many times have you been sharing a story only to be interrupted by a person eager to share his own? Well, when I'm working with clients on communication skills, I remind them to listen for understanding, but not to respond necessarily. But during this podcast, I'm asking you to listen and consider your related stories, and think about which stories in your life might have impacted you in a similar way. I'm here today with Don Wettrick, who's an innovator in the education field, works for a school system in Indiana, and I'm so happy to have him here with me. Some of you have read some of my work about the public school system and some of the issues that we've had and some of the great teachers that my boys have experienced. And so I was excited to look deeply into some of what Don is doing and have him come and share some of the stories behind why he does what he does. So welcome, Don. Thank you for joining me.
I'm happy to do that, Sarah. I'm excited to be here.
So the first question I always ask my guests is to share something about themselves that people wouldn't normally know, because I like for our listeners to get to know the guest just a little bit more intimately so that they feel more connected with you when they hear your stories.
Sure.
So tell me something that most people wouldn't know.
I had a full cardiac arrest when I was 20. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I used to have a heart problem, and back in 92, there was just going to be a regular surgery, so I put it off, and now it's as easy as an ablation, so it's like a really pedestrian thing. But yeah, I had an arrhythmia attack that just kept developing, and yeah, it's scary. It's weird to wow, I can't feel my left side. Wow, I'm going into shock. Wow, it's traumatic, but I'm here, and the great thing is like I'd put the surgery off so long that they're like, hey, there's this new procedure that's an ablation, and it was in the early days of WPW surgery. So yeah,
that's really scary. And are you close with your family?
Extremely.
It had to have impacted your relationships with them.
No, I mean, I've got a really loving mom and dad. The only thing that was strange, and it's kind of funny because I'm married to her now, but I felt legitimately bad. I was in the back of the car, and to no degree of irony, the person that was driving me to the hospital, I was playing softball, ironically enough. And one of my best friends, his mom was a cardiac nurse, and his dad was an OB-GYN, so I guess that doesn't really play into anything. But she was a cardiac nurse, and like I could tell in the look of panic that they're like, okay, we're running out of time. And, I couldn't feel my left side, and I couldn't talk. I was slurring my speech, and I was like, it occurred to me, I'm like, oh no, I know what's happening. And so I felt genuinely bad that the girl that I really was in love with, whom I married then 3 years later, that like I genuinely felt bad. And I was like, man, my mom and dad are really going to be upset if I'm dead. But it didn't change anything because like I'm really close to them. So
no, well, I guess I was thinking that in the opposite effect that I know when we've had difficulties with our sons with any kind of health issue, it actually changed our relationship sometimes in a positive way because we would recognize more of how fickle and unpredictable life can be.
Yeah.
And so at least for the first few months after, it's a constant, I love you so much, and lots of affection. And of course, it dies down a little bit because you get into life. But it seems to me that would impact your story in terms of making sure that you tell people you love how you feel about them and also just living life to the fullest that you can.
Yeah, definitely. I'm grateful.
Yeah, I could see that. Wow. So the reason I wanted to get you on this was because I am
inspired by what you're doing with your students. My husband and I have a son who is not a traditionally exceptional student. We'll put it that way. We kind of lost him motivation-wise in 6th grade, and he never really recovered in terms of academics. And I had all kinds of theories about why that happened. And one was that his teacher in 5th grade was really mean and super critical. She would yell at the kids. She clearly needed to retire. But the other reason is that, just like me, but without the coping mechanisms, I think our older son really needs his topics and subject areas to be applied and interdisciplinary. So one of the things that I found when he was struggling with math was that all I had to do was associate it with an engine and how it runs, or, looking at really mechanical applications of math concepts, and then he'd get it. So that's why I'm so inspired by what you're doing. So first of all, tell me just a little bit about what you do in terms of your students.
So I run a class called Innovation and Open Source Learning. And the beginning of the school year, we learn how to think for ourselves. We learn how to rephrase and repackage problems. We learn how to seek opportunities instead of complain about it. We do collect and connect sessions. In essence, we get them to think in very modern ways, using various strategies, good brainstorming, great techniques. But then we go from a cool idea, bro, to, okay, let's do something. And that's kind of where we kind of started to go into some really neat areas that got a lot of, in some cases, good media attention, because, if something is a great idea, then don't be proud of the idea, then do something. And then that's really what skirts into the entrepreneurialism. So I don't teach an entrepreneurial class, but it tends to be at times. There's like 4 quadrants here we're talking about. By the way, I'm not coining this. This is one of my favorite persons is Tina Seelig at Stanford University. And she was the first one that said, okay, there's innovation. I'm sorry, there's imagination, then there's creativity, there's innovation, there's entrepreneurship. Every kid has a great imagination. We start to quell it by 3rd grade because of the testing culture, but every kid has a great imagination. Great. When you do something about it, when you put crayon to paper or whatever, that's creativity. Imagining is just thinking about it. Creativity is doing it. And then if you're creative in ways that are totally new or new to the world, great, that's innovative. But still, it's mostly kind of conceptual. And if you can bring that concept into an event or a product or a solution, well, that's entrepreneurial. So like it's so innovative for the sake of being innovative. Like, oh, that's such a great idea. Great ideas are a dime a dozen. Bringing it to the world is really the challenge.
Right. So we're right back into that whole idea of application, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and purpose, right? And so like, I work really well with kids that, well, like your son, right? They're smart at some things. It just may not be sitting down and being quiet and being compliant. They like to move around. They like to fidget. They like to do things. And oftentimes those kids want to have a purpose other than being a good student. Like for some kids, that's a reward and that's good for them. Like, you're a good boy. And like, awesome. I got an A. And some kids look at it like it's an A. That's cool. But
it's not meaningful.
Right. So when we try to personalize it and then we try to get them things that are meaningful to them, then it has some leverage, which full transparency. Right. I started the class based on the TED Talk I saw 8 years ago from Daniel Pink. What motivates people is mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And that's true. So, we want to master something. It's why kids break their collarbone and they still want to do a kickflip.
Right.
Autonomy is like, if you leave me alone or if I can go on this journey and I can lead it, I'm happy. And then purpose is what we just talked about. So those 3 things inspired me to start this class. And we had some lucky breaks along the way and some really good positive media coverage. But that's been able to, we've been able to do this wacky educational experience. 1, because I work for a great school corporation, and 2, that we just had a willingness to like, okay, we could try this and it might not be good, which by the way, my first 2 years of this class, were not great, but it was so new, and it was such a stretch for the kids to think this way that they were just tolerant. And yeah, so that's what we do.
So is this with all high school students that want to take the class,
Yep.
or is it
Yep,
specific?
it's an elective. Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Which I do now a lot of work in elementaries and middle schools. So I have not only my side business, but even within my own school district, I can go to other elementary schools and help them do 20% time or Genius Hour, or whatever they call it. So the foundations are found in elementary. Most middle schools can team and have this done. Because by middle school, like the realities is that we have to teach the standards, whether you like it or not. And by the way, some of the standards are great. It's not all.
Right.
So a middle school teacher says, well, I don't have time to do this once a week. Well, you have time to do it once a month. So this week, science class can dedicate up to that 45 minutes of a Genius Hour. Next week, it's English. Next week, it's social studies, et cetera, et cetera. And then by high school, it just needs to be its own class. You know, a cool idea for it to be able to incubate and grow. It's got to be its own class. So thus I offer this as an elective.
So it sounds to me like you had experiences like this when you were in school that kind of inspire you to get to this point. What grade was it?
Yes and no.
Happened?
So, yeah, like I'm a preacher's kid, of sorts. So my mom and dad were in it. Well, my dad was in formal education. He was a high school, in the glory days of shop, and then he had to move to guidance counselor because shop wasn't cool anymore, which bugged him no end. And then my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she's a teacher. And so I had to get good grades, and my parents were nothing but kind, but my economic reality is you've got to go to college. So I complied. I didn't like school. Matter of fact, one of the things I love to say is I did not go to college to learn. I went to go to college to get a degree.
Yes.
That answers everything. And so, yeah, I mean, like seriously, my spiritual awakening was Daniel Pink. And then soon following, after I started following into Dan's work, I started to come across people like Seth Godin. When I read Lynchpin, I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes sense.
Ding, ding, ding. Right.
And then like, seriously, this is where I'm like literally pinching myself, because in the last several years, they've become contemporaries. It may be a stretch to say friends, but like, I mean, heck, I brought a group of kids out to see Seth last month. Like,
wow.
It's been but like so Seth, cool. But then Seth's like a really big fan of what we do, because he's like, we should do the following things in education. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so Seth, true to his word, is like, I'll support you. And he has. He's been just a awesome.
So we just need more programs like this. We need to scale it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So,
but the superintendent that has the guts to do it too.
Right. Of course. So you said it was 7 years ago when you saw that TED Talk?
8, probably.
8. And were you a teacher at that time?
Yeah, I've always been a teacher. Yeah.
Okay. So that's been your career. So you've seen students like you, but without the motivation to get good grades, which
normally C&D students. Yes.
Right. So, there had to have been a moment when you were watching this TED Talk and you were thinking about a student with major potential that was flopping around with no purpose.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. I mean, who was the student, and why?
It was most of them. So I had the luxury of, I had a weird class. So I taught middle school for 10 years and I was done. So,
yeah, I can imagine.
And I loved my kids. I loved my kids, but so like, okay, going back one step, my dad told me I wasn't always in education. My first 3 years out of college, I worked, ironically enough, for a think tank in Indianapolis, and I didn't like what I did, and quite frankly, I wanted to be my dad, and so and they had paid for all of my education. So when I went back telling him I was going to go back to school, I wasn't asking him for money, but I was like, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to go back, and I think I want to be a teacher." And he says, and this has stuck with me. He says, Donnie, I don't care if you teach for the next 20 years. Just promise me you won't teach 1 year 20 times. So I was like, wow, right. Ooh. So anyway, all of a sudden I was teaching middle school English, and I just, out of my own sanity, I was like, okay, I'm starting to teach 1 year 20 times. And I promised myself I wouldn't do that. So I was like, I needed a fresh start. I go to a high school, and then somehow I dumb luck my way into teaching freshman English, 1 or 2 sections, but the rest of it was like the announcements and videography. And I grew it, and I ended up growing it to a 4-year program. Well, none of us had any idea what we were doing. So we learned along the way. I had an endorsement, which was very vague, and they're like, that's good enough. So we invented our own classes, and it was them. So it was my ragtag bunch of C and D students who academically were just C and D, but for my class, they'd bleed for it, right? So in a way, before the innovation class, there was FCTV. And so FCTV was like, when I saw Dan's thing, I'm like, oh yeah, I should have a class called an innovation class. So because my kids, their passion was videography or documentary filmmaking, but some kid might want to use this class for like coding or building a nonprofit. So that was our those kind of students inspired me to have this sort of class other than just for the videography side.
So you watch this TED Talk and the alarm bells are going off in your head. You're having one of those lightning bolt moments. Holy shit, this is something I need to do. I'm driven to do.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened when you finished that TED Talk. Did you watch it like 4 times in a row? Or?
So, well, I still have the email. There's a friend of mine that said, watch this. And I click on it and I watch it during my lunch break. I show it to the kids the next period. And that was the funny part of failure is a hell of a thing. So I make kids watch it. It's a little, I mean, for freshman English, it was a little dry for them. They're like, it's all right. And I'm like, well, what if I gave you,
boring. Right.
I was like, yeah, what if I gave you 30 minutes on a Friday where you could do what you want? And they're like, okay. And that was when I realized that it was the New Year's resolution. It's fun to talk about what you're going to do, but here was the dirty secret. Kids like to talk about what they're going to do, but what they really want to be is told what to do. People prefer their prison sentence. So when I said, you're free to work on the way you want, what do you want me to work on? I'm like, no. Last Friday, you said that this was your time. Because like the thing, like, yeah, finally, I can do things I want to do in school, and I can learn the things that are valuable to me. Great. What's valuable to you? Oh, I don't know. What do you want me to work on, Wettrick? And how will I get an A? So it took time for them to be unschooled. It took time for them to be like, the door's open, you can walk out. And that's when I discovered the ones that were like, seriously, I can go, were my skateboarders and artists. The kid that had a straight A was like, you're kidding me. I have to be reassured that I'm going to get an A. So right. You tell me what you want me to do. I'm like, bro, this is your time. You said you were going to look forward to this. I did look forward to this, but out of fear, I just want you to tell me that I'm going to get an A. So it was a rough start.
Were there girls in that class?
Absolutely. I'm using the metaphor of bro because they were my most reluctant. But the girls
I had to ask because I have 2 boys and you're speaking my language. So it just.
Yeah. Well, and actually they were usually more reluctant because whether we like it or not, especially, and we're starting to get away from that a little bit, but a good girl is compliant. A good girl is quiet. And matter of fact, I remember my first year towards the, like right before winter break, had this poor girl. She I could tell she's trying not to cry. And she's like, Mr. Wettrick, I just want to tell you, just tell me what to write because I will write you such a good essay. What do you want me to do? I said, what project do you want to work on? She goes, I don't know anymore. And I don't care. I don't like you anymore. I am so stressed because this is the only B that I have.
Oh, God, that is
and
so
I'm like, she didn't know what to, and the thing is, I'm like, she'd never thought about what she wanted to do in college, just what I'm told. So if her dad said you should go into legal, okay, let's do that. And then like, and by the way, this isn't a child problem. This is a human being problem. People don't know what they love. They just like the comfort of being told what to do and then complain about it.
Right. That's been my experience as well.
Right. So, I mean, the bold somehow are lucky. And occasionally then I'd get a girl that says, oh, I want to do this and plant her flag in the ground. And normally good things happen. And by the way, even when things didn't happen according to plan, they made a pivot. And over the long haul, they saw that it worked out. In the moment, failure sucks. But some of the girls and some of those kids were like, wait a second. I'm like, you learn what not to do. In college, we call that changing your major, which, by the way, cost you about $25,000. So,
cool. I did it 4 times. So,
right. So well, heck, I think one of the greatest Disney movies that they do not promote is Meet the Robinsons. Here's your invention. Didn't work. Throw a party. You're closer. You're closer to what does work. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a holy mess for a while, but it ended up working out.
Wow. Well, first of all, just the fact that you saw this as a potential and went for it and had some failures and then decided to keep going, that's a testament to you, but it's also testament to your supporters, your encouragers,
Absolutely.
and the fact that you were driven by your students' needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to see a lot more of that. We do have some teachers in our experience, in my family's experience, that are like that were really innovative in the classroom, but they were so limited because they didn't have the support that they needed. So they may have these great stories about students who had all kinds of potential.
Well, let me speak directly to them, because a lot of times I hear teachers like, well, I can't because my principal will do blank. This is one of the things, and I'm fully aware that, and again, I'm very supported. And in the beginning, I drove my principal nuts, but I was always fully transparent with what I did. Like, I'll take to Twitter and Facebook and now LinkedIn and say, here's what I'm doing. What I'm doing for the kid is the correct thing. It may not be in the scope and sequence of what we're supposed to do for preparing them for the ACT or SAT, but it's right for them. And so in my humble opinion, if a teacher is like, I want to do these things, I just can't. Yes, you can. You're not going to get fired over doing what's best for kids. And if you're at a school corporation that you will get fired over it, you may be doing yourself a favor.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had a few teachers in recent years leave the school because they were treated badly because they were being innovative or because they were doing the right thing for their students. And
yep.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. They are. They absolutely are. The three that I have in my head were very happy within, 3-4 months. They were heartbroken at the time, but 3 or 4 months later, they knew that they had made the right decision.
But that numb and comfortable is not a life I want my children to know.
No. And do you have kids?
3.
So that is another inspiration. So tell me about, I'm sure I'll share one of my stories about my kids in elementary school, but I'd like to hear a story about one of your kids and how you've applied what you're doing with your high school students to your children. I'm assuming your children are younger than mine.
No, my senior is 18 now.
Oh.
And I'm sorry. No, she's not. She's 17. She's got another 5 months to go. Sorry, Ava. She's become quite the LinkedIn celebrity.
Oh.
I'm surprised you didn't find me through her.
Wow,
she's been killing it. So she's been, unfortunately / good for her, she's daddy all over again. Her mental approach, and she's listened to dad's rhetoric. Well, listen, in the story is everything about Ava. So one day she was like, hey, I want to, she knows that I speak for a living on the side. And so I had a speaking thing in Illinois, and it was drivable. And she's like, you know what? I want to see what you're like speaking. Can I go with you? Sure. So it was just Ava and I. This is last year, so she was 16. So we get in the car, and all of a sudden there's those god-awful celebrity gossip minutes that came on the radio. Ugh. And it was something about Kim and Kanye or something other, whatever. And then Ava goes, this right here. I'm like, what? And she's like, more people in Generation Z are taking life advice from celebrities that know nothing. And she's like, and Dad, most of my friends don't know who Tim Ferriss is. Oh. And I'm like, it's a good point. Like her Mount Rushmore of cool is people like Peter D.
Godin and
Seth Godin. Right. That's funny that you say Seth. I'll get to that in a second. And so I'm like, you're right. And she's like, Generation Z needs better mentors, not Kim and Kanye. And there was this long pause, and she went, mentors, Generation Z, mentors with the Z. Dad, I should start a podcast called Mentors, and then maybe I'll be able to interview like him. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. So her podcast is killing it. And that's what she does. She introduces people like that the average 17-year-old doesn't know, but they should. And people that she looks up to. And quite frankly, she just thinks it's a cool opportunity to interview some of the people that she loves, and then has like a cool opportunity to talk to them. And so she's been killing it, man. She's, so yeah, like seeing the Wettrick DNA in how she approaches things. Now, the downside to that is she's a very confident young lady who scares off some people.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So I feel bad for her at times. But she's growing, and then there's my middle one. And like the thing that Alicia and I always focus on is like, Anna, you be Anna. Don't be Ava. Because like Ava's now cast in I mean, that's tough. Like, well, case in point, like Ava just got an invite like literally 5 days ago to go to the Economic World Forum for the UN. I mean, like Ava's getting to do some cool stuff.
Yeah.
And Anna is a freshman. And so, and the middle child. So we're like, Anna, you identify with what you love. Right. And I'm like, you identify with what you love, honey. And so I mean, I can tell, and she's even admitted, she's like, sometimes I'm a little jealous of Ave, and that's fine. But let's work towards something. And I have no doubt she will. She's more into the singing, musical choir stuff. And so she'll find her passion. That's all. By the way, the only thing I want for my children is to be happy. And you'll find a way to monetize happiness. And then there's my little guy, and Grant, and he's similar into what you're talking about with your son. Does he do school? Kinda, because he has to, but it's a struggle with him. And we've found some incentives, and luckily he's got a wonderful teacher this year who incorporates Fortnite and esports into his curriculum. So he's digging it. But again, like I really, they know the balance. Like, daddy's a teacher, and it looks bad if you fail. So please don't fail. However your reward is, we'll allow you to pursue some of your own passions. Tell me what it is, and we'll support it. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, again, like I said, so far it's working out. Ava's 17, Anna is 14, and Grant is 9. So, yeah. So we'll see. But I'm proud to say that they're happy, and yeah, we live out these things. This mastery, autonomy, and purpose, we live it out in our family, and there's not a lot of stress on the grades. Grades will come, and if they don't, that's okay. So
yeah, that's kind of how we've changed things in our house. When the boys were little, it wasn't about grades because it was elementary school, but once they got into middle school and high school, we were a little more intense about doing their homework and stuff like that. But my experience with our older son has been so traumatic, really, that it colored everything for me in terms of education. And one of the experiences was he was being bullied in 6th grade, 7th grade. He was at a middle school that was over-enrolled. And there were just far too many students in this small school. And one day he came home and he was kind of upset. He's a pretty mellow kid. So I said, what's going on? And he said, well, this kid is bullying me. And I said, like what? And he said, well, he told a Nazi joke in front of me, and we're Jewish. And Jacob was maybe one of 3 Jewish kids in his entire experience in school in our little town in Montana. And I said, oh, that must have hurt your feelings. He said, no, because he's kind of stupid, so it didn't really bother me that much. But what did bother me was that he slapped me across the back of my head as I was leaving school, and I actually fell down. He hit him physically hard enough to knock him down. And my comment to him was, of course, if he does that again, you turn around and with all of the force of your movement, shove him with your hands on his shoulders or at his chest. Just turn around, totally surprise him, catch him off guard, shove him back. Because you only have to do that once and he'll leave you alone. But you have to show that you're not going to be bullied like that. And he said, okay, Mom. And I could tell, he said, the next thing out of his mouth was, but I don't want to hurt him. So, of course, my husband and I both looked at him and said, okay, we understand that, but just keep in mind, this is going to get worse. It's going to get worse. As long as he doesn't know that you're going to stand up to him, it'll escalate. So the next time he did it, again, our older son didn't do anything. He just said, hey, don't do that, or tried to use his words. And this kid is one of those that was being bullied at home by his older brother, probably by his dad. And so it didn't have any impact, the words. So finally, Jacob did turn around and he shoved him really hard. He said, I used the momentum of my body getting up from him having pushed him down. And he's not a little kid. So he turned around and used all of his body weight and the momentum from him moving and pushed this kid on his shoulders, like right in the front of his shoulders and chest, and just shoved. This kid went falling down onto his backside. And of course, my older son wasn't sure what that meant because he was a little panicked, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was going to shove him that hard. And the kid was in shock. I said, describe to me what his face looked like. And he said, well, he was a little, and he thought about it for a second, scared. And I said, yeah, isn't that horrible? Isn't that sad? And our older son said, yeah. And I said, but he's going to leave you alone now.
Yeah.
And our older son walked away. He walked home. We're in a small town, so walking home is a possibility from school around here. And it was over the next few days that this kid started trying to make friends with our older son. And it didn't change anything academically for our son, but it did change his view of what school was about. And it wasn't necessarily about learning.
That's a great story and a great learning moment. And it's funny because he also taught you guys some things.
He always does.
Well, that's, I mean, number one, I mean, in some funny way, it's good to have that adversity. It just is. I mean, I think that sometimes our kids are so sheltered that having gone through that, he's a better person for it. And, you know, as much as I don't want my kids, but well, heck, I remember when you know, Ava started her first YouTube channel when she was like in 6th grade and she got trolls. Like, you know, this video sucks. And I'm like, does it, Ava? You know, because, you know, mom was like, how dare they? And that's terrible. I'm like, well, does it suck? Right. And Ava's like, what do you mean? I'm like, do you think your video sucks? She says, no. I said, okay, the person who made the comment, click on their profile. Okay. How many videos do they have?
None.
Well, none. I'm like, okay, so what do you think? Well, I think a person needs to mind his own business. Okay. Another person, you know, commented, your lighting sucks. It's too dark. I said, Ava, is it dark? Yeah, it kind of is. Okay. What are you going to do about it? Maybe I could, because she used to do Littlest Pet Shop. Like she'd have the scripts written out and she'd like act them out. And I'm like, so what are you going to do about it? Like having that adversity, did I like my little girl being, you know, talked to like that? No, but it helped. And I hate
it definitely does. Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with that self-reflection. And it actually brings me right back to this whole idea that some people don't know what they want. They want to be told what to do. And if you come back to that adversity and having to deal with that kind of thing, I think it helps you know better what you don't want. And as I talk to our boys a lot and in my coaching clients, I ask them to tell me about their deal breakers. What are the things you absolutely cannot tolerate? And then it helps open their minds to what they do want and how they do want to move forward. And I think with students, it's really important to recognize that as well and to talk to them about those issues. I say that if you know your deal breakers, it opens up all kinds of opportunities. Because if you have a list of things you want, then you're almost limiting the other opportunities that are flying around you because you think you know what you want.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So, wow. I would like to dig into this a little bit more, particularly about your teaching history, but I want to keep this a slightly brief podcast because it's already been pretty meaty. And what I'd really like to do also is make sure that with the associated blog post for this podcast, that we have links to some of your other work.
Sure.
And also to Ava's podcast so that people can look that up and start listening in on that, because I'm sure that will be a good, interesting thing to add to this blog post. And maybe a quote from you or something that you would encourage or inspire other teachers to go ahead and do what they know is the right thing to do in terms of stepping up when they think they can't.
Yeah. I mean, one, I think that it's funny. This is almost kind of a Gary Vaynerchuk moment, but right now, everybody's in a battle for attention and then trust. If you get attention, that can lead to success, but it's a lot of times short-term success. If you have attention and trust, that is the gold standard. So I think that if teachers want to be transparent about what their new journey is, they're going to get attention. But when you start showcasing that what you're doing is right for kids, there's trust. Start striving for attention and trust. And mind you, you're going to get, hey, look, like from time to time, I get some hate thrown my way. Oh, you're just showcasing. You're just bragging. Yes, I am. Oh, you're just using your students to further your agenda. Yep, sure am. And my agenda is to bring this kind of class into every high school I can. And so when people really want to unpack it, by the way, my students absolutely use our network, a network that I've built over the last 8 years. So it's a symbiotic relationship. But no matter what, I want to say, hey, world, education can look like this. By the way, here's what Robert did. Here's what Jake did. Here's what Michaela did. Now, is that me using their work? Sure is. So I think that transparency of, and by the way, like and every teacher has, or every parent has to sign like a kind of a confidentiality agreement, but like I'll do a live stream from the class. We'll have great discussions. I'm like, hold on, before you say that, let me just upload. Okay. And go. I'll put it on, I'll do a live stream. Mm-hmm. In fact, we've gotten into some great debates with some really good authors and thought leaders. Cause I'm like, hey, we read your article. My students have some feedback for you. Throw that up there. because if you do, now more people in your school and people outside your school going, hey, what's going on there needs to be supported.
Right.
So I would just encourage any educator to be more transparent and bold.
And the fact is, if you don't tell the stories of your students in some way or another, then you're not doing them any benefits either, because those stories are the things that are going to drive people to support what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So sure, I guess the word exploiting pops into my head, exploiting these stories. But I think it has more to do with what the motivation and intention is behind it. And sure. That is share these stories so that more students can experience this way of thinking and this change to an academic life so that they can actually do something in the future. And I just have to put a little plug in for my friend Larry Boyer, who recently published the book, Robot in the Next Cubicle. And it's all about what innovation has done to the workforce, what the industrial revolutions of the past and of the future are going to continue to do to the workforce. And if we aren't preparing our students by doing classes like this, then we're doing them a huge disservice. So I would say, please share your stories, share their stories, let them share their stories, because that's the only way we're going to inspire other teachers and other education systems to keep supporting this kind of transition.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's been quite a journey. And like you said, by being transparent, we've built a nice supportive network.
That's terrific. That is terrific. So for our listeners, we will have some links in the associated blog post with this podcast. So please look through that and click on them and check things out. Don, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And we will definitely do a follow-up in the next 6 or 8 months. And
if anybody wants to learn more about what we do, ironically enough, something we didn't have time to get into, the state in which I live actually asked me to be my own nonprofit. So we have all sorts of cool resources. Actually, homeschool parents have been really instrumental in helping us out too. But startedupfoundation.org, because we treat education like a startup, thus Start Ed Up. We're doing a lot of cool, fun things. So if you are a parent and you're like, man, I don't have Don's class and he doesn't live here and I want my son or daughter to have this kind of thing, we've got some stuff for you. So.
Oh, that's terrific. I can't wait to share that on the podcast and the blog post. So thank you again. And I will be in touch in the near future. Anything else? Any last story you want to add?
No, that's about, I've gone on. I've gone on quite a bit, but no, I do appreciate you having me on. And if there's any way I can be of service to your audience, then, my best place to find me, LinkedIn. I'm very active here recently. And then Twitter, it's at Don Wettrick.
Great. All right. Thanks so much. And I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Share Them Will. Please visit my website for more podcast episodes, blog posts, and information about how I can help you develop and share your stories at elkinsconsulting.com.
Now listen to me, honey, while I say, how could you tell?